The urgency to do everything possible to get the capabilities into the hands of warfighters, Emergency Powers Defense Production Act, whatever it takes, and an audit is certainly part of it.
Why do you want to do this? Why do you want to do this job? What drives you?
You have 30 seconds.
Because I love my country, Senator, and I've dedicated my life to the warfighters. People see me as someone who hosts a morning show on television. But people that really know me know where my heart's at. It's with the guys in this audience who've had my back, and I've had theirs. We've been in some of the darkest and most difficult places you can ever be in. You come back a different person. And only by the grace of God am I here before you today. I'm doing this job for them, for all of them.
Thank you, Mr. Hegseth. Senator Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Hegseth, thank you. Thank you for your service. So if you're confirmed as Secretary of Defense, you will oversee our military, including about 250,000 women who currently serve on active duty in the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Space Forces, and the Marines. And I have serious concerns that your behavior toward women disqualifies you from serving in this role. Now, I've been trying to get answers from you for quite some time on this. You haven't wanted to meet or to answer any of my questions, so we'll just have to do it here and dive in. I want to pick up on some of the questions asked by Senators Shaheen and Gillibrand and Hirono, and I just want to make sure we have a list of some of the facts that I think are undisputed. I'm not going to talk about anonymous sources. I'm just going to quote you directly. We've got the video. We've got it in print. So going back to January 2013, you told a Fox News interviewer that women in the military simply couldn't measure up to men in the military, saying that allowing women to serve in combat roles would force the military to lower the bar. You picked up on that same theme in 2015, making remarks on Fox News, referring to women in combat as, quote, it would erode standards. June 2024, you said on Ben Shapiro's podcast, quote, women shouldn't be in combat at all. And then, of course, we've talked about it in 2024. You published a book, and you say on page 26 of your book, we need moms, but not in the military, especially in combat units. Page 48 of your book, you claim that women should not be in combat roles because men are distracted by women. And then 10 weeks ago, you appeared on the Sean Ryan show and said, I'm straight up just saying we should not have women in combat roles. Now, I presume you recall making all these statements?
Senator, I'm not familiar with the article you're pointing to in 2013, but it underscores my argument completely, because in that 2013 argument, I was talking about standards.
No,
standards are what it's always been about,
Senator. Let's not have
Senator.
this same fight again.
Always been about Senate
I've
standards.
quoted you directly. We've got the video. We're happy to show it. But I want to be clear here. For 12 years, you were quite open about your views, and your views were consistently the same. Women are inferior soldiers, sailors, Marines, airmen, and guardians. And in case anyone missed the point, and these are your words from 10 weeks ago, women absolutely straight up should not be permitted to serve in combat. And I notice on each of these quotes, those are said without qualification. It's not by how much you can lift or how fast you can run. They don't belong in combat, period, or your words, straight up. And then on November 9th, 2024, just 32 days after your last public comment saying that women absolutely should not be in combat, you declared that, quote, some of our greatest warriors in combat are women, and you support having them serve in combat. Now, that is a very, very big about face in a very, very short period of time. So help me understand, Mr. Hegseth, what extraordinary event happened in that 32-day period that made you change the core values you had expressed for the preceding 12 years?
Senator, again, I very much appreciate you bringing up my comments from 2013, because For me, this issue has always been about standards. And unfortunately, because of some of the people that have been in political power for the last 4 years, priorities other than standards, lethality, and meritocracy have driven decision-making.
I'm quoting you from the podcast. Women shouldn't be in combat at all. Where is the reference to standards? That they should be there if they can carry, if they can run. I don't see that at all, Mr. Hegseth. What I see is that there's a 32-day period in which you suddenly have another description about your views of women in the military. And I just want to know, what changed in the 32 days that the song you sang is not the song you come in here today to sing?
Senator, the concerns I have and the concerns that many have had, especially in ground combat units, is that in pursuit of certain percentages or quotas, standards have been changed. And that makes the combat more difficult for everybody involved.
Let me make a suggestion about what happened in that 32 days. You got a nomination from President Trump. Now, I've heard of deathbed conversions, but this is the first time I've heard of a nomination conversion. And I hope you understand that many women serving in the military right now might think that if you can convert so rapidly your long-held and aggressively pursued views in just 32 days, that 32 days after you get confirmed, maybe you'll just reverse those views and go back to the old guy who said straight up, women do not belong in combat. Now, Mr. Hegseth, you have written that after they retire, generals should be banned from working for the defense industry for 10 years. You and I agree on the corrosive effects of the revolving door between the Pentagon and defense contractors. It's something I would have liked to talk with you about if you'd come and been willing to visit with me. But the question I have for you on this is, will you put your money where your mouth is and agree that when you leave this job, you will not work for the defense industry for 10 years?
Senator, it's not even a question I've thought about because it's not one
about it right now.
It's not one. My motivation for this job
I understand
has never
that. I
been
just
about
need
what
a
could
yes or no
conceivably
here.
come next.
Time is short. I just need a yes or no.
I would consult with the president about what the policy should be
In
at the Defense
other
Department.
words, you're quite sure that every general who serves should not go directly into the defense industry for 10 years, but you're not willing to make that same pledge?
I'm not a general, Senator.
You'll be the one. Let us just be clear. You're saying sauce for the goose, but certainly not sauce for the gander.
I would want to see what the policy of the president
Oh,
is.
I'll bet you would.
Thank you, Senator Warren. Senator Tuberville.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks for your hard work and your committee's hard work, Mr. Chairman. This has gone well. I'd like to submit this letter, topic conduct at Vets for Freedom for Hegseth. I'd like to submit that for the record, please.
Without objection.
General Hegseth, Mr. Hegseth, thanks for being here today and with your family. I know this is tough. That's what it's all about, though. You're a tough guy. Been here for a while. Never seen this many people that here for a support of a nominee. That's impressive. I met with a lot of them yesterday, and they are very passionate. So thank you for willing to take this on, and congratulations on your nomination. I'm worried about recruiting. I mean, we can look at everything out there and talk about all these things, these narratives, but at the end of the day, I came from a team sport where the people, the players actually won the games. And that's what's going to happen here. You're not going to win the game. Now, you're going to set the precedent. You're going to get the blame or the credit, but there's going to be people that's going to be under you that's going to set the precedent for the future of our country. Now, the war games that we play on our computers with our adversaries right now, for us, it don't look good because our military, we're in trouble. Our whole country's in trouble. Thank God President Trump got elected November the 5th. We couldn't have kept down this same path. We could not, that could not happen. I met with a couple of generals this summer. Coach, we're spending more money on transgender restrooms than we are coverings for $100 million airplanes. That's not acceptable. We can't do that. That's not what this is about. Met with a couple of Navy SEALs not too long ago. They just got back from crawling around in the mud and the muck overseas, unknown places. Couldn't tell you where they've been, carrying a weapon, obviously protecting us and our allies. And the first week they're back, what'd they do? They had to go through a week of DEI training. Both are now out. They give it up. It was embarrassing to them of what they had to do. We've lost all sight of what we're doing in our military, lost all sight. It starts with leadership, and it starts with recruiting. Why would a young man, used to when I was growing up, if you couldn't afford to go to college, you had the opportunity to go to the military where you could learn a trade. You could learn, you could make a living for your family, and eventually possibly get an education. That was a good alternative. We've forgotten that. We've forgotten it. We can't give up on our young people. Young people are our number one commodity in this country, and they're the ones that's going to live and die for the freedom of this country in the future. So, again, thank you for taking this on. Recruiting. Our service academies
Recruiting is a really big
are
issue
meant
here.
to serve as our
Let's see what his
primary
response is.
commissioning source of officers. It now appears that they are a breeding ground for leftist activists and champions of DEI and critical theory. Now, not all, but some. And some is way too much.
Some is
How are we
absolutely
going
way
to
too much.
eliminate this, Mr. Hegseth? How are we going to get this back on track to where we grow our leaders? I had a young man that forever he wanted to go to West Point. I got him a nomination, I got him accepted, and he turned it down. He says, Coach, I'm not getting involved with that mess. How are we going to overcome this?
Senator, thank you for the question. And I think it comes down to leadership, clear leadership. From President Trump through me, should I be nominated? And that's what soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Guardians see, is clear leadership. It says, this is what we believe. This is the mission we're going to give you. Here's the equipment we're going to give you, and here's how we're going to support you. Because the military, at a lot of levels, Senator, has been for generations a family business. You know, my grandfather served, my father served, I served, my daughter served. That chain has started to break with generations of people my age and older talking to their kids and grandkids, wondering, pondering, do I want them to serve? Will my country use them responsibly? When that kind of doubt is cast, you get serious recruiting problems like we do right now. You get questions about whether I want my son or daughter to follow my path in West Point, which I've heard multiple times. Would I want my... And so you have to rip, root, and branch the politics and divisive policies out of these institutions and then focus them on creating and preparing actual future military leadership. West Point traditionally is focused on engineering, and rightfully so, because in our fighting forces across all services, we need the best and brightest minds in engineering, in addition to military studies. That's what I did at ROTC at Princeton, military science. And we need more uniformed members going back into West Point, the Air Force Academy, the Naval Academy, as a tour to teach with their wisdom of what they've learned in uniform, instead of just more civilian professors that came from the same left-wing woke universities that they left, and then try to push that into service academies. When that changes, Senator, I truly believe under Donald Trump, we will have a recruiting renaissance. That sends signals to the world, to our enemies and our allies alike, that America's back. And thankfully, then we have the men and women of our country willing to want to serve.
Thank you. And it's about attitude, too. And I love your attitude. You've got to be motivated. You've got to understand that people, they will hook up with you. They will understand and learn under their leaders. Why would you fight for a country that you don't love? That's what I keep hearing from a lot of our college kids that they're getting from these woke universities that they go to. Now, and I worked at a lot of them. That is one of the excuses I get from our kids. We've got to break that. Another one. According to the Pentagon, between 2001 and 2024, the number of civilian employees in the Office of the Secretary of Defense has nearly doubled from 1,500 to 3,000. Civilians on Joint Chiefs has increased from 191 to almost 1,000. Our military end strength goes down. Our staff numbers are exploding. What are you going to do about that?
Senator, we're going to address that. We won World War II with 7 four-star generals. Today, we have 44 four-star generals. There's an inverse relationship between the size of staffs and victory on the battlefield. We don't need more bureaucracy at the top. We need more warfighters empowered at the bottom. So it's going to be my job working with those that we hire and those inside the administration to identify those places where fat can be cut so it can go toward lethality.
Thank you, Senator Tuberville. Senator Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Hegseth, welcome to this committee.
Thank you.
You know, we have far too much partisanship in our country right now. I think it's eating away at the fabric of what has always made this country great, about bringing people together from all sorts of backgrounds, all sorts of experiences. And we know that in our motto, together as one, we are strong. And so we in this committee, and certainly I speak for myself, but I think I speak for many of my colleagues, want to take partisanship out of this proceeding as much as we can. I'm not naive. It's out there. I get it. But we've got to try to take that out. And I want you to know that as a member of this committee, I have voted in a bipartisan way for secretaries of defense. I voted for 2.
Yeah, Lucinda, tell us exactly more about that. Saying this man has no character for any position in the government, not competent to be associated with our government.
During that 4-year period. So we want to keep that in mind as to what we might see in this coming administration. But I voted, and we voted by a big margin.
Austin, thanks for the input there.
As well. But
it's interesting how
having an opportunity to
one
get
side
to
or the
know
other
the
the
person
perspectives
and
are on this.
understand their qualifications and understand the standards. You know, I made repeated
If you guys want to
requests
watch
to meet with
the
you prior to this
full
meeting.
screen view of it, I added in the pinned chat a link to the full screen view that you can check out as well.
That I was happy to vote for.
So we've got this streaming kind of in the vertical view for folks that are on mobile on the go, then also horizontal
Was there a
if you
reason
want to
you
get a
were
fuller view of
afraid
it.
to have one-on-one
So just check out the
meetings
pinned
with
chat
some of my
if you want.
colleagues before the hearing?
To look at it there.
Senator, I know there was a great deal of outreach to multiple offices. Schedules get full. There's a lot going on.
I was ready.
And I welcome the opportunity,
I was
pending
ready.
my schedule, to have an opportunity to sit down.
I was ready. It would have been so much better to have that opportunity to talk beforehand. I think that's a big mistake, and it doesn't set us on a good course when you refuse to meet with people and have a professional conversation about the huge challenges that we face at the Department of Defense. My colleagues, the folks who introduced you and others, the chairman has mentioned about the management of the DoD is a concern, cost overruns, delays on weapon systems. We need strong management at the Department of Defense, first and foremost. Have someone who's going to grab the reins and give the taxpayers value for having the most lethal fighting force in the world that defends freedoms, but we got to do it in an efficient way. I've heard about the jobs you've had in the past. Let's just talk about qualifications. I know you had 2 previous positions. How many people reported to you in those positions?
Senator, at Vets for Freedom, we were a small upstart. Our focus was
Just the number,
working
please.
on Capitol Hill, going back to the battlefield
Just
to
the
support
number.
warfighters.
Just the number, please.
We probably had 8 to 10 full-time staff and lots of volunteers.
So you had 8. Has there been any other? We've heard about the 2, and certainly there's been a lot of talk about the mismanagement, et cetera, et cetera. I'm just curious. I won't go into that. Just curious. So you had 8 there. Have you? What's the largest number of people you've ever supervised or had in an organization in your career?
Not 3 million. Senator.
No, I don't expect that. No one, very few people have ever had that experience. But how many? It's a straight up question.
I think we had over 100 full-time staff at Concerned Vets for America, roughly, with thousands of volunteers.
So 100 people.
I was also a headquarters company commander, which would have been
Okay, that's fine.
a couple of hundred.
Couple-
Nothing remotely near the size of the Defense Department.
Right.
I would acknowledge that.
Actually,
Senator.
not remotely near even a medium-sized company in America, let alone a big company in America, especially a major corporation. And we're hiring you to be the CEO of one of the most complex, largest organizations in the world. We're the board of directors here. I don't know of any corporate board of directors that would hire a CEO for a major company if they came and said, you know, I supervised 100 people before. They'd ask you, well, what kind of
I mean,
experience
you
do
can
have?
have
We need
made this
innovation.
argument about
Can you
Barack
give me an
Obama that
experience or your
he
actual
did not have any
of
experience
driving
actually leading
innovation in an
people, and he came
organization?
into office
Give
as a
me an
senator
example
without
of
any
where you
real
have done
leadership
Oh, my goodness,
experience,
Senator,
and yet
absolutely. It
looks like he was
concerned
cut out
Veterans
for the
America.
job.
We
There's a
created
difference
fixing
between potential
Veterans Healthcare
and then
Task Force, a
experience if he has
bipartisan task force that
the
never been
right
done before,
grounding, the right
to
principle
create
behind
policy,
it.
to drive policy change on Capitol Hill that organizations fought ferociously against. We got the VA Accountability Act passed and the Mission Act passed in a way that a nonprofit
Yeah, Ben.
of our size,
I like your last name,
organization,
Ben.
has never done. And
Thank you.
that's
I'm sure
testified in all
a
the
lot of these
letters.
senators not only got
I mean,
money, but they're
okay, I have limited time. Thank you for that. Give me an example of where
they're
you've
trading
driven
on this
down
stuff,
costs.
so they need the
I've heard
Raytheon and other,
examples that Senator Blumenthal
other
gave.
insider trading
The
info
cost
to
was a
keep
real
going. They
problem
don't want
for
to
you
get called out on
in your
that stuff, so they need the system to
50-person
operate as is.
organization
And I appreciate the
that
folks that have
actually
given the live
raised
a
a
like.
lot less than what you actually spent. Did you drive costs down? If in a 50-person organization, let me tell you, we've got to drive costs down dramatically in a organization of 3 million people and hundreds of billions of dollars. You don't have that experience that you can talk about. To me, this is, or acquisition reform. Acquisition reform, you bring that up. Have you had experience in acquisition reform?
I've written about and studied on acquisition reform.
Have you
for quite
actually
some
done
time.
it?
Because what we need in the hands of our warfighters better change because we're not doing it well right now.
It better, and we need people who have experience actually doing that. You know, you talk about standards. Again, I'm going to go back to CEO of the most complex organization in the world. I don't think there's a board of directors in America that would hire you as a CEO with the kind of experience you have on your resume. You talk about standards. You talk about raising or low, we have a problem of standards in the DOD, and we have to raise standards for the men and women who serve. Do you think that the way to raise the minimum standards of the people who serve us is to lower the standards for the Secretary of Defense? That we have someone who has never managed an organization more than 100 people is going to come in and manage this incredibly important organization and do it with a professionalism and has no experience that they can tell us that they have actually done that? I have real problems with that. This is not about other issues that are brought up. They're all very important. I'm just about trying to get things done, managing efficiently, and having the best people who have demonstrated that in a large organization. And I'm sorry, but I don't see that in your background. There are a lot of other things you can do very well. You're a capable person, but you have not convinced me that you're able to take on this tremendous responsibility with a complex organization and having little or no significant management experience.
Senator, I'm grateful to be hired by one of the most successful CEOs in American history, should I be confirmed.
Mr. Hegseth, it seems to me that you've supervised far more people than the average United States senator supervises typically.
That was killer.
And
Except for former governors, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Mullen, I understand you are yielding back your time and do not wish to ask questions. I was misinformed. Senator Mullen,
okay.
you're correct.
Caught me totally off guard there. I'd like to submit for the record signatures by 32 members of the House of Representatives who are veterans. The signatures call on the Senate to honor the constitutional duty of advise and consent by conducting a fair, thorough confirmation process that evaluates his nomination solely on the substance and merits. His distinguished military service, academic credentials, and a bold vision for revitalizing the national defense. I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record.
Without objection.
You know, there's a lot of talk going about talking about qualifications and then about us hiring him if we are the board. But there's a lot of senators here I wouldn't have on my board because there is no qualifications except your age, and you got to be living in the state and you're a citizen of the United States to be a senator. Other than the fact we got to convince a lot of people to vote for us. And then when we start talking about qualifications for if you're qualified for it, could the chairman tell me what the qualifications are for the Secretary of Defense? Mr. Chairman, could you tell me what the qualifications are for the Secretary of Defense?
I'd be happy for
I'll read it.
for you to do that. Yeah.
Let me read it for you because I Googled
I
it.
was getting some advice from
I
my
understand
second
that.
in command.
Yeah, but I'm just making a point because there's a lot about qualifications, and I think it's so hypocritical of senators, especially on the other side of the aisle, be talking about his qualifications, not being able to lead the secretary or be the Secretary of Defense, and yet your qualifications aren't any better. You guys aren't any more qualified to be the senator than I'm qualified to be the senator, except we're lucky enough to be here. But let me read you what the qualifications of the Secretary of Defense is, because I Googled it, and went through a lot of different sites, and really it's hard to see. But in general, the U.S. Secretary of Defense position is filled by a civilian. That's it. If you have served in the U.S. Army Forces and have been in the service for, you have to be retired for at least 7 years, and Congress can weigh that. And then there's questions that the senator from Massachusetts brought up about serving on a board inside the military industry, and yet your own secretary that you all voted for, Secretary of Austin, we had to vote on a waiver because he stepped off the board of Raytheon. But I guess that's okay because that's a Democrat Secretary of Defense. But you so quickly forget about that. And then Senator Kaine, or I guess I better use the senator from Virginia, starts bringing up the fact that what if you showed up drunk to your job? How many senators have showed up drunk to vote at night? Have any of you guys asked them to step down and resign from their job? And don't tell me you haven't seen it, because I know you have. And then how many senators do you know have got a divorce before cheating on their wives? Did you ask them to step down? No. But it's for show. You guys make sure you make a big show and point out the hypocrisy because the man's made a mistake. And you want to sit there and say that he's not qualified? Give me a joke. I mean, it is so ridiculous that you guys hold yourself as this higher standard and you forget you got a big plank in your eye. We've all made mistakes. I've made mistakes. And Jennifer, thank you for loving him through that mistake. Because the only reason why I'm here and not in prison is because my wife loved me too. I have changed, but I'm not perfect. But I found somebody that thought I was perfect. And for whatever reason, you love Pete, and I don't know why. But just like our Lord and Savior forgave me, my wife's had to forgive me more than once too, and I'm sure you've had to forgive him too. And so thank you. So before I go down this rabbit hole again, tell me something about your wife that you love.
She's the smartest, most capable, loving, humble, honest person I've ever met. In addition to being incredibly beautiful. Don't forget about your kids. I'm supposed to talk about my kids?
No, well, she's also the mother.
Oh, an amazing mother.
Yes.
Of our blended family of 7 kids.
Brother, I'm pulling you
which
along.
love her.
I'm trying to help you here. You know, do you believe that you're going to be running the Secretary or the Department of Defense by yourself?
Senator, absolutely not. Just as President Trump is assembling his cabinet, I look forward and already am in the process of building one of the best possible teams you can imagine, with decades and decades of experience outside of the Pentagon, driving innovation and excellence, and also inside the building, knowing how to make it happen. Yes, sir.
So, in your organizations that you did have the privilege of running, did you have a board that you...
In both organizations, we had a board, yes.
Okay, and what did you do with that board? What kind of decisions did you make with them?
Those boards provided oversight and insight into decision-making.
They all have special, unique sets that maybe filled gaps that you're not the expertise in?
Yes, sir.
So do you believe you're capable of surrounding yourself with capable individuals that you're going to be able to run those same ideas by, and surround yourself with people that are smarter and better equipped in maybe areas that you don't necessarily carry those expertise with?
Senator, the only reason I've had success in life, to include my wonderful wife, is because of people more capable around me and having the self-confidence to empower them and say, hey, run with the ball. run with the football, take it down the field. We'll do this together. I don't care who gets the credit. And in this case, that's how the Pentagon will be run.
Let's end with this, Mr. Chairman, about the qualifications. You got a man who has literally put his butt on the line, who served 20 years in the service, multiple deployments, has heard the bullets crack over the top of his head, has been willing to go into combat, been willing to see friends die for this country, and he's willing to still put himself through this. His wife is willing to still stand beside him, knowing he wasn't perfect, knowing that all this was going to be brought up, and he's still willing to serve the country. What other qualifications does he need? That I yield back.
Thank you, Senator Mullen. Senator Duckworth. And again, we really are going to strictly enforce the rule about no demonstrations or noise. The distinguished ranking member.
Just a point of personal privilege to make a correction. The reason that General Austin required a waiver was not because of his participation in a corporate enterprise. It was because he did not have 7 years of interruption between his service and his appointment. Second point is that if any of us were appointed as Secretary of Defense, we would be subject to the same types of questions. And the case in point is Senator John Tower was nominated for Secretary of Defense. It was discovered by his colleagues that his behavior was not commensurate with the responsibilities despite his service, and he was voted down. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Duckworth, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And also, Secretary Mattis had to have this waiver as well. Mr. Hegseth, this hearing is about whether you are qualified to be Secretary of Defense, and one of the qualifications, to answer my colleague's question, is to actually win the votes of every member of this committee and to be confirmed by the United States Senate. And you need to convince us that you're worthy of that vote, because the people of the state of Illinois voted for me to be their senator so that I could cast that vote when it comes to picking who is going to be the next Secretary of Defense. This hearing now seems to be a hearing about whether or not women are qualified to serve in combat, and not about whether or not you are qualified to be Secretary of Defense. And let me just say that the American people need a SecDef who's ready to lead on day one. You are not that person. Our adversaries watch closely during times of transition. And any sense that the Department of Defense that keeps us safe is being steered by someone who's wholly unprepared for the job puts America at risk. And I am not willing to do that. With that in mind, Mr. Hegseth, I want you to try to explain to the American people, this committee, who have to vote for you, and to our troops who are deployed around the world, why you are qualified to lead the Department of Defense. We already know that you've only led as large as a 200-person organization. We already know that you so badly mangled a budget that after you left, they had to bring in a forensic accountant to figure out what went wrong. And that the largest budget you ever managed was about $18 billion. You know, that is about 51,560 times lower than the Department of Defense budget of $825 billion. $16 million is 51,568 times smaller than the defense budget. Please describe to me, Mr. Hegseth, you talk about DOD passing an audit. Please describe to me a time or an organization when that you led underwent an audit, because you say you're going to hire smarter people than you to run this audit. I'm not asking you to be an accountant. I want you to be able to tell me what kind of guidance will be given to those employees, what will happen whether or not you pass that audit. Have you led an audit of any organization, yes or no? I don't want a long answer, yes or no. Have you led an audit of any organization of which you were in charge?
Senator, in both of the organizations I ran, we were always completely fiscally responsible.
Yes or no, did you lead an audit?
And the way
yes
my leadership
or no, did you lead an audit?
Stated,
yes or no?
Completely
what are you afraid of? You can't answer this question. Yes or no, did you lead an audit?
She
Do you
seems
not
very
know
pleasant.
this answer?
Senator, every part of my leadership of these organizations has been misrepresented.
I will take that as a no. What were the findings? So there were no findings because you've never led an audit. What guidance did you give the auditors? None, because you've never led an audit. Nobody expects you to be an accountant, Mr. Hegseth. What we expect is for you to understand the complexity of this Pentagon budget process that is absolutely necessary
tuning
to
her out.
outfit
How
our
about you guys?
warfighters. Look, the Secretary of Defense is required to make quick decisions every single day that, well, with high-level information that's being provided for them. A Secretary of Defense has to have breadth and depth of knowledge. Right now, I am concerned that you have neither. Mr. Hegseth, what is the highest level of international negotiations that you have engaged in, that you have led in? Because the Secretary of Defense does lead international security negotiations. There are three main ones that the Secretary of Defense leads and signs. Can you name at least one of them?
Could you repeat the question, Senator?
Sure. What is the highest level of international security agreement that you have led? And can you name some that the Secretary of Defense would lead? There's three main ones. Do you know?
I have not been involved in international security arrangements because I have not been in government other
Okay.
than serving in the military. So my job has been to
So no, the
lead
answer is no.
men
Can
and
you
women in
name one of the
combat.
three main ones that the
If you're
Secretary
talking
of
about
Defense
defense
signs?
arrangements, I mean, NATO might be one that you're referring to.
Status of Forces Agreement would be one of them.
Status of forces agreement. I've been a part of teaching
So-
about status of forces agreements.
But you don't
inside
remember to
Afghanistan.
mention it? You're not qualified, Mr. Hegseth. You're not qualified. You talk about repairing our defense industrial complex. You're not qualified to that. You could do the acquisition and cross-servicing. You can't even mention that. You've done none of those. You talked about the Indo-Pacific a little bit, and I'm glad that you mentioned it. Can you name the importance of at least one of the nations in the ASEAN, and what type of agreement we have with at least one of those nations? And how many nations are in ASEAN, by the way?
I couldn't tell you the exact
No, you
amount of
couldn't,
nations
because
in
you've
that,
not
but I
even
know we have
bothered to
allies
do-
in South Korea and Japan and in AUKUS with Australia, trying to work
Okay.
on submarines with them.
Mr.
and data
Hegseth,
transfers
none
with
of those
them.
countries
We
are
have
in
allies
ASEAN.
across.
None of those three countries that you've mentioned are in ASEAN. I suggest you do a little homework before you prepare for these types of negotiations. Listen, Mr. Hegseth, this
She's
is,
like flustered from her own.
we ask our
voice.
troops to go into harm's way all the time. We ask them to go into harm's way. And this behind me is a copy of the Soldier's Creed, a copy that usually hangs over my desk here in the Senate, and you should be familiar with it. It's the same copy that hung over my desk at Walter Reed every single day that I woke up and fought my way back because I wanted to go back and serve next to my buddies who saved my life. This same copy, these words are repeated over and over and over again. And let me read out two things to you, two sentences. I will always place the mission first, and I am disciplined, physically and mentally tough, trained and proficient in my warrior task. Mr. Hegseth, our troops follow these words every single day, and they man up and they pack their rucksacks and they go to war. And they deserve a leader who can lead them, not a leader who wants to lower the standards for himself or raising the standards for other people. And by the way, our troops already meet the standards. We ask troops to man that ship, fight that fire, fly that helicopter until their very last breath. And they do that every single day. They cannot be led by someone who's not competent to do the job. How can we ask these warriors to train and perform the absolute highest standards when you are asking us to lower the standards to make you the Secretary of Defense simply because you are buddies with our president-elect? And by the way, he has filed for bankruptcy 6 times. I'm not quite sure he's the kind of CEO you want to refer to as a successful businessman. Let me make it clear. You can't seem to grasp that there is no U.S. military as we know it without the incredible women that we serve. Women who've earned their place in their units. You have not earned your place as Secretary of Defense. You say you care about keeping our armed forces strong and that you like that our armed forces are meritocracy, then let's not lower the standards for you. You, sir, are a no-go at this station.
Thank you, Senator Duckworth. I would like to submit for the record a letter submitted by Mr. Brian Marriott that says anyone who would claim that Pete mismanaged funds at Vets for Freedom is ignorant of the facts. Without objection, it will be admitted to the record. Senator Budd.
Thank you, Chairman Wicker, and congrats on your chairmanship of this committee. I want to thank you for your leadership and your handling of this today. I think you're doing a great job. So I want to also submit for the record a letter submitted by Mr. Daniel Catlin, the former operations manager at Vets for Freedom. Mr. Catlin's letter states that Mr. Hegseth and Mr. Catlin conducted weekly meetings to meticulously review every dollar that the organization spent. Pete's hands-on approach and dedication to financial responsibility ensured that Vets for Freedom operated within its budget. Mr. Catlin's letters also states that Pete treated his staff with the utmost respect, regardless of race or gender. So I ask unanimous consent to enter this into the record, Mr. Chairman.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you. Mr. Hegseth, congratulations on your nomination. Thanks for appearing before the committee today. I enjoy meeting you in my office before Christmas, and I've enjoyed our friendship before that. You know, you stated in your advanced policy questions that the American people need to be informed, engaged, and inspired to join our military. I wholeheartedly agree with that. And we also have a problem, though, with obesity and falling academic standards. It's very concerning. And we've talked about that before. So if confirmed, how would you approach increasing the number of Americans eligible to serve in the military, but without lowering standards?
Well, Senator, I think there are already, to the credit of, I believe, the Army and other services have now caught up to that, which have piloted programs that have had some success, that have allowed young Americans who want to serve in the military but can't necessarily pass the ASVAB or pass the APFT to get into basic training, an opportunity to get caught up, a preparatory class.
Sure.
Unfortunately, yes, we do have a problem of obesity in our country, not necessarily something that the, if I'm confirmed, Secretary of Defense is able to address. But I do think leading from the front matters. I do think having a Secretary of Defense that will go out and do PT with the troops matters, that has been out there and done that before. And hopefully that's a motivating factor for young people. But the reality of obesity and criminal backgrounds and medical problems have long been an issue of recruitment in America, unfortunately. What changed is the perception of military service because of the condition of the services and, frankly, because of, in some ways, the way our schools don't teach young people to love the country anymore. And if you don't love the country, why do you want to serve that country? That's a deeper problem. But all of those things need to be addressed to revive recruiting, and obesity is certainly a part of it.
Thank you for that. So I've had multiple conversations, young folks back in North Carolina, young men, young women, and we get to meet a lot of them. But, you know, I hear from some of these folks who I encourage to join the military. They say that they're concerned that it's become politicized. And if confirmed, would you commit to working with my office to address the military recruiting crisis and ensuring the military is focused on warfighting?
Senator, absolutely. Number one, from day one, with a mandate from the Commander-in-Chief, who received that mandate when Americans spoke out loudly and said, we want peace through strength, we want America first foreign policy, and we don't want political ideology driving decisions inside our Defense Department. That was clear. It's an infection that the American people are acutely aware of, which the men and women in this room have lived firsthand. I've lived it firsthand. And that's why it will be a priority. And I truly believe, and I'm humbled by this, the response we've already seen from young men and women who've decided to join the military when they had said, I wasn't going to. But seeing a Commander-in-Chief, Donald Trump, reassured them. Seeing the possibility, if confirmed, of a Secretary of Defense that would have their back reassured them. And so in the first couple of months after President Trump's election, we have already seen, the numbers are there, a recruiting surge in all the services that I would welcome the opportunity to continue. And it's humbling to think that families across this country would have confidence in us to deliver for their young men and women. There's no more important task.
Thank you for that. So shifting gears a bit, I want to hear some of your thoughts on the growing fighter aircraft capacity gap with China and what this means for a potential fight in the Indo-Pacific. So if confirmed, what policy recommendations will you make to the President on procurement and maintenance of 4th and 5th generation fighters while we continue to research and develop 6th generation and collaborative combat aircraft?
Senator, that's a very important conversation, one that I've been looking at a great deal. A lot of it, just to be clear, involves classifications and understanding precisely cost and capabilities, including capabilities of enemy systems, both not just 4th and 5th, but potential 6th generation, which we've already seen a prototype released from the Chinese. That's a dangerous development, considering at least the publicly understood condition of NGAD, which I look forward to the opportunity to looking underneath the hood on that. but ensuring 4th and 5th are capable and upgraded as necessary will be a part of our contingency. But when you look at what's happening in the Indo-Pacific,
I'll be back. We'll keep the
say
stream going.
Operability, range is going to matter because it's such a large battle space. That will all factor in decisions that are made. And that's where I feel, frankly, a little bit liberated, is that I didn't work at Lockheed or any number of, pick a defense contractor. I didn't mean to point one out in particular. Pick any. I haven't. I don't have a special interest in any particular system or any particular company or any particular narrative. I want to know what works. I want to know what defeats our enemies, what keeps us safe, what deters them, what keeps our enemies up at night. Whatever that is, I want more of it, and I want to invest in it. And I know that's the view that President Trump has as well.
Thank you. You know, some have commented recently about the need to eliminate immediately a manned aircraft. So I'd say maybe one day, but that day's not now, and certainly not before 2027, especially in the Indo-Pacific. So if confirmed, will you commit to work with my office in this committee to ensure the proper mix of fighters, manned and unmanned?
I look forward to working with you on that, Senator, because unmanned will be a very important part of the way future wars are fought. Just the idea of survivability for a human being drives cost and time in ways that unmanned systems do not. But I look forward to that conversation, Senator.
Thank you, Senator Budd. I now recognize Senator Reed for a unanimous consent request.
Mr. Chairman, I would ask unanimous consent that 2 letters be submitted for the record. One letter is signed by numerous organizations, including the Government Accountability Project, the other signed by several organizations, including the Truman National Security Project.
Without objection, so ordered. Now, Senator Kelly, Senator Rosen got here after the gavel went down. Do you really want to go ahead of her?
I am going to defer to my good friend and colleague, Senator Rosen,
That
from
is
the
a really
great
good,
state of Nevada.
Really good decision. Senator Rosen, you are recognized.
And thank you, Senator Kelly. I owe you one. Thank you, Chairman Wicker, Ranking Member Reed, for holding this hearing. And Mr. Hegseth, I appreciate your service and your willingness to serve again. However, I am deeply disappointed that you would not agree to meet with me, as other members have said on this committee prior to this hearing, as is the precedent for this committee and others. So let me tell you a little bit about what I would have talked about had you made yourself available prior to the hearing. Nevada is home to the premier aviation training ranges for both the Air Force and the Navy, the largest ammunition depot in the world, and the only place in the country where we are able to verify the reliability of our nuclear stockpile without the need for explosive testing. The Nevada National Guard is one of the only few units across the country with the mission of fighting wildfires. That's for another hearing. And currently activated to fight the devastating fires around Los Angeles in support of our neighbors. We therefore play a critical role in our national security, and the person who holds the position of Secretary of Defense matters greatly to Nevada service members and our military equities. But every single person who serves in the military, we've talked about, my colleagues, esteemed colleagues, have talked about recruitment and retention. One day, they will become a veteran. So my veterans and the folks who are serving active duty now are concerned about what you think. DOD does not have jurisdiction over Nevada's 200,000 plus veterans, but I am interested in your views about the service members once they've transitioned out of the military, given the influence you would have while they're in service if confirmed. In 2019, on a segment of Fox and Friends, you said that veteran service organizations, VSOs, I'm going to quote, encourage veterans to apply for every government benefit they can ever get.